By the time we get into early next week, partly to mostly sunny.
Hello, I'm meteorologist Tom Atkins. Welcome to the 2020 Spring Severe Storm Special. I'm joined by my colleagues, meteorologists Tom DeVecchio and Craig Flint. We'll cover a wide variety of severe weather topics in the upcoming half hour. My topic is going to be downbursts, a common damaging wind in our area during the spring severe weather season.
With coronavirus just gripping the headlines across the globe, many wonder, how will the weather have an impact on this virus, or any virus for that matter? We caught up with a local expert to find out.
We'll have those stories later in the show. But first, have you ever wondered why tornadoes form in some parts of the country more than others? Let's take a look and find out why. Tornadoes are the most violent of atmospheric phenomena, and the United States is the king of tornado formation. No other country even comes close to what we have when it comes to the formation of tornadoes. Even in our local area of northwestern Pennsylvania, some spots seem to be more prone than others to the formation of tornadoes. Let's explore this further. To answer the question of tornado formation, we need to first understand how tornadoes form in the first place. Serious studies of tornadoes started way back in 1948, so we certainly have learned a lot about tornadoes and how they form. Despite this, though, we don't have all the answers, but there are some generalities that we can look at that appear to be true for most tornado formation. The first is that you need two air masses of different densities. Second, you need a trigger, a mechanism to initiate the tornado formation, which would eventually lead to tornadic storms. And third, a twisting factor that allows for a storm to rotate. Let's take a look at these individually, both locally and nationally. This may be a little different than what you learned in school about tornado formation. You may have learned that in order for tornadoes to form, cold air has to hit the warm air. And that's not totally true. What you need is air masses of different densities clashing into each other. When a dense air mass hits a less dense air mass, you generate circulations needed for tornadic development. And what are the primary ways to adjust the density of the air? Temperature and moisture. The cooler and drier the air, the more dense it becomes. So when this cool, dry air hits warmer, moist air, the cooler air flows underneath the warmer air, starting the circulation. The greater the temperature and moisture differences, the greater the circulation. There's no place in the world where this happens more often than in the central part of the United States and in other parts of the U.S. as well. And the reason for this, if you look at mountain ranges across most of the world, most of the major mountain ranges are east-west. You have the Alps and the Himalayas in Asia. But here in the United States and North America, our mountain ranges, the Rocky Mountains and to some extent the Appalachian Mountains, are oriented more north-south. You have open areas, open land, where cold, dry air can meet more moist air and allow those tornadoes to form more frequently. So we have the instability, now we need the triggers to set off that instability. Think of the triggers as a car with gas but no spark plugs. No spark plugs, nothing to set off the gas, and the car doesn't run. If you don't have the trigger, there's nothing to set off the instability and you don't get severe weather. So what are those triggers? Usually it's a cold front, a trough, or a low pressure system. These systems provide the upward push of air to get the instability started to create clouds and thunderstorms. Now on a national scale, these would be areas ahead of a cold front, along the northern edge of a warm or stationary front, or just east of the center of a low pressure system that we sometimes call Larco's Triangle, which is formed by the low pressure, the cold front, and the warm front. Now on a local level, the lake breeze is often the trigger for severe weather. As a lake breeze forms, it moves inland and with the aid of higher elevation allows for better chances of thunderstorms and tornadoes to develop. So we have the circulation, we have the trigger. Now what we need is a way to twist that circulation. What we need is shear, in this case, directional shear. Directional shear is the change of wind direction with height. In tornadic weather, winds at the surface are often out of the south and then they back to the west or northwest with height. This, what we call backing of the winds, allow for the twisting motion that you often see in tornadic outbreaks. Now, on the local level, the difference in terrain can cause what we call frictional forcing, and that could lead to some low-level rotation. As that frictional forcing gets more pronounced, we often get that twisting motion that usually produces smaller tornadoes. As you might guess, the interior sections of northwestern Pennsylvania have the better terrain features that allow for that frictional forcing, and therefore they also receive more tornadoes than we do along the lake shore. Tornado formation is indeed a very complex issue. You could have all the triggers, you could have all the instability, you could have all of the twisting, and you still might not get a tornado. Such is the way of things in nature. But if there are tornadoes around, you can bet that your weather authority will be there to inform you on these dangerous storms. Now you know why the Midwest and Tornado Alley get hit with tornadoes so many times each year. Many of you have asked us on Facebook about a wide variety of topics on severe weather. You asked certain questions, and what we're going to do during the show is we're going to answer some of them for you. I'll start out with a question from Mary who asks, does the lake protect us from severe weather? Well, the answer is, it depends. Depends really on how the thunderstorms are initiated and how the severe weather actually starts. If the severe weather is from a large weather system like a frontal system, low pressure, squall line, typically the lake provides a limited amount of help. In fact, sometimes the lake may actually help spin up tornadoes a little bit more readily than places on the inland side. However, most of our severe weather here in northwestern Pennsylvania is initiated by the lake breeze. In that case, the lake does indeed provide a stabilizing effect. As the lake breeze first starts out, it tends to cool the lake shore first, and that helps keep the air more stable. As that lake breeze moves inland during the afternoon, it hits more unstable air and tends to cause more severe weather and tornadoes.
Welcome back. We all know that weather has a big effect on our health, but in the coronavirus epidemic, meteorologist Craig Flint talks to experts about how the weather affects that virus.
Well, certainly no doubt about it, most of the questions that we've been getting via Facebook have been in regards to COVID-19 and really any virus. And how will the weather help, if at all? 2020 seemingly started off like any other year, with New Year's parties, the resolutions, and the proverbial clean slate in hopes of good fortune, prosperity, and health. But just a few months into the new year, everything came to a screeching halt. A new normal, where we retreat to our houses in an effort to self-distance ourselves from the outside world, the nicer spring weather, and everything else we all look forward to after the winter. All because of
SARS-CoV-2.
Say that again.
SARS-CoV-2.
SARS-CoV-2, better known as the coronavirus or COVID-19, and we've all been forced to become familiar with this. Practicing social distancing, washing our hands more frequently, wearing face masks in public, and isolating ourselves from our loved ones. But through this all, there's one common denominator: the weather. It never stops, and it leaves us all looking for that glimmer of hope. With the nicer, warmer weather on the way, will it have an impact on coronavirus, or any other virus for that matter? It's not all bad news, but it could be a little better. Dr. Becky Dawson, an epidemiologist with Allegheny Health, explains.
I don't think we're going to see an impact this year. I think everyone needs to be prepared for COVID-19 to be part of the conversation, regardless of what the weather does over the next 2 weeks, 2 months, maybe even into 2 years.
Not exactly the news we were hoping for, but there are some glimpses of hope on the horizon.
People in China, so as we're looking at what's happened in Wuhan, and it's kind of interesting, they're 3 months ahead of us, right? So we can actually kind of like look forward a little bit and model it a little bit. So we aren't seeing reinfection there, and that should be really encouraging to us, and know that we really, as the public health workforce, we are watching this day by day to make sure that reinfection isn't happening there. So there's a lot of good things coming out there.
Dr. Dawson also says even as the spread of this infection slows, there is still a lot that we don't know, which is why it is referred to as novel coronavirus, meaning it is new and nobody has immunity to this virus. But further studies continue to this new novel coronavirus. So what about other viruses, like the common cold and flu? How is the weather determining how this is all going to go?
So we know a lot about influenza, right? So the virus that actually causes flu. Influenza also, just like COVID-19, is spread through droplets. It's a respiratory disease. So a cough, a sneeze, a runny nose left on a door handle that somebody else picks up. We know a lot about flu. So flu, actually, the virus that causes, your actual respiratory flu, actually doesn't like hot air and moist air. So rising humidity is actually kind of cool. If I sneeze on you right now, right, my droplets are going to maybe go out about 6 feet and then drop to the ground. If it's humid outside, the moisture in the air, and this is where you can talk, right, humidity, moisture in the air is actually going to pick up, like the droplets are going to kind of combine with the moisture in the air. It's going to make them heavier and they're going to fall to the ground faster.
But it's really not going to have, from what I'm understanding, all of the sunshine, the warmer temperatures. It's not going to change the course of this at all.
We don't expect it to, not this first run through. Again, as it becomes part of kind of normal, like our normal disease occurrence, year to year, and what we're working with, it might become seasonal for different reasons. But right now, I think we should expect for this summer for the disease to continue on its normal course, unless we do the social mitigation, right? Unless the actual public health interventions are really taken seriously.
So while the coronavirus, common cold, and flu are all separate of each other, Dr. Dawson also notes that the coronavirus is not airborne. So what we need to do is continue to practice our social distancing for a little while longer. But there's still hope that we can get out there and enjoy the great weather we have in summer here in Erie.
You're watching the Spring Severe Storm Special.
So when we think about damaging windstorms, obviously the tornado is first in our minds, but damaging winds can be in the form of straight line winds and downbursts, and in some cases they can be even more damaging. Meteorologist Tom Atkins with more.
Most days in the spring and summer are rather tranquil. Partly sunny skies, no damaging weather, maybe a little bit of wind, but we're talking about a very strong and damaging wind here called a microburst or a downburst. It's different from a tornado because it's a straight line wind that can do damage to properties, mobile homes, RVs, and just about anything else. Just imagine taking a bucket of water, and the water represents the rain and the wind. It's dropping thousands of feet from the cloud base right down to the ground. And as it hits, there's so much force it spreads out in all directions to do its damage. Microbursts can be as strong as a low-end tornado, an EF0, an EF1, or an EF2. But that really doesn't matter when you're hit by one. The damage is still significant. So while we are taking shelter when one of these events are occurring, we thought we'd talk to our veteran storm chaser, Steve Marshall, about what it's like because he's going into the storm. In your experience chasing not only locally, but all around the Great Plains, what's your experience going into and out of a microburst?
When we're setting up a storm chase, we try to always approach a storm from the south or the west, so it's always moving away from us. But with microburst, it's really tough to avoid that because it kind of surprises you. It's tough to detect on radar, and it just appears out of nowhere. Once in Kansas, we took a head-on gusts coming out of a thunderstorm that registered 126 miles an hour and actually did damage to the car. It was so intense. Locally, these things are tough to detect on radar. We try to always approach from the proper directions, but in this case, the one in Cochrane caught us by surprise, and I was in the midst of it before I was aware just how serious it was going to be. And where I was on the hilltop was just the beginning of it. Most of the damage was directly behind me for about 2 miles and down trees and roof damage, things like that.
Now we'll hear from our unique mother-daughter storm chasing team, Heather and Rebecca Reichel, about what they've experienced with downbursts in our area.
It was August of 2019, and I just remember that thinking that it was almost like a surgical precision strike through the center of town. As I entered town, many streets were closed. There was trees on houses, trees through houses, lots of electrical lines arcing in the water. You could see the exact place where the straight line winds came down, and if you drew a line across the city, it would have been a straight line. It was impressive. It was sad to see it happen in a populated area like that, because there was just so much destruction.
My first real storm was July 2014. The call came in on the scanner that a tornado touched down in Mercer County. I was only 13 at the time, and I really didn't know what to expect. It really did look like a tornado came through that area. Porches were torn apart, and trees were on top of cars. A roof looked like it was ripped clean off. Later, I found out that a tornado didn't cause all that damage, but a phenomenon called a downburst.
Let's talk about what makes a downburst. And this is a local and a recent picture. This is just in summer of 2019. This footage taken by Lisa looks like a test of the atomic bomb, a big mushroom cloud. But this is a downburst in Crawford County, and you can see the air rushing from the cloud base down to the ground, probably accompanied by rain and spreading out, just like in the example we showed you with the bucket of water. And if you're underneath it, right there, you might be like our storm tracker, Steve Marshall, also in Crawford County in Cochrane, the trees blowing, the air spilling down, and all kinds of damage being done. But it first starts with a thunderstorm. And how do thunderstorms start? Well, think of a warm spring or summer day. The sun beats down, there may not be any clouds, but all of a sudden, you know what happens with warming air. It starts to rise. And when it gets to what's called the condensation level, it can't hold the moisture anymore, so it forms clouds. And as long as that lifting continues, you get a thunderstorm. The lifting stage is called cumulus, just air rising. The mature stage, when you get thunder and lightning, is updrafts and downdrafts. And in the dissipation stage, well, that's completely going down. So let's take it one step at a time. Again, rising air, forming your cumulus clouds, maybe a few showers, descending air, thunder and lightning, the downdrafts, and at the very end, one of these garden variety thunderstorms can take some of that air from the top of the cloud and just drive it into the ground. But it might not be a garden variety thunderstorm. It may be a squall line, it may be a supercell thunderstorm, but here's how the downburst occurs. Again, rising air, and when you get to the top of the cloud there, you're producing hail, and it's very heavy in there, so it starts to come down. The downdraft is going down as the updraft weakens, and what you've got going is that big rush of wind and rain just spilling to the ground and spreading out in all directions. Now, here's an interesting fact. Aircraft. Back in 1985 in Dallas, an airliner lost all its crew and passengers because it flew into a microburst. Again, the plane coming in, getting a little lift initially, flying under it, and then getting crushed to the ground. Pilots like to avoid these as well. So let's take it another step further. There's a couple of types of downburst. You can get what's called a microburst, which means the base where everything hits and gets destroyed is 2.5 miles wide or less. But they do come in bigger forms, a macroburst, and that is even wider than 2.5 miles, and the damage even more severe. Now, when you get a bunch of these together, you got a new term, español, derecho. That's Spanish for straight ahead or direct. And if you want to add insult to injury, a derecho is a widespread wind storm with many microbursts. Now, it doesn't matter whether you're a pilot or the general public. You don't want to encounter these, and we here at the JET team of meteorologists use our Doppler radars to show you where the winds are, where they're the strongest, and where you're most capable of seeing a microburst or a macroburst. Downbursts, not that uncommon in our area, and can be as strong as a small tornado. One of our viewers, Jay, asked me the question, do tornadoes ever hit Erie? And yes, they do. If you remember back to November of 2017, a low-end tornado came down in Mill Creek along with a downburst and moved eastward into the city of Erie. Other data shows that back in the 1950s, there was a small tornado that hit the Little Italy section of West Erie. So yes, tornadoes do hit Erie. They don't care what's on the ground. The lake usually doesn't protect us, and certainly being in a city, that was a myth as well. Tornadoes do hit cities, including Erie.
You're watching the Spring Severe Storm Special.
So watch versus a warning. It's important to know the difference, and it's something that you will hear frequently as we head into the summer months. So what is a watch? Well, quite simply, that just means we're watching it. You should just go about your daily activities and just keep in the back of your mind that there is a potential for some strong or severe weather later in that day. Warning, that is your call to action. A warning is definitely more important. That is when you should be seeking shelter, because severe weather is occurring right now or will be shortly. So have a plan in place, and if you hear the word warning, you need to take the proper precautions and get yourself to safety.
We want to thank you for being a big part of our 2020 Spring Severe Special Show. And of course, my colleagues, meteorologist Tom DeVecchio and Craig Flint, and our producer, Kent Urbanski. Of course, throughout the severe weather season, you can see us on JET, Fox, YourErie.com, Facebook, and Twitter. Stay safe, stay healthy, and stay with us for all your severe weather coverage.